Episode number 50 of Making a Case. Why Black folks' love for culture and religion doesn't mix. Let's get it. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Making a Case. I am your host, Dr. Jacob Isom, educator, author, speaker, entrepreneur, content creator, father, a little bit of everything. All right. Hey, we made it to episode 50, man. Round of applause. All right. Now, I must be honest. All right. I was gonna go buy uh, a hat and some confetti and balloons and all that for our 50th episode. But I thought about it. I said, self, do I really want to clean all that up? So here we are. All right. So forgive me for not giving a proper celebration that the 50th episode is due, but I promise I will make it up to you with the content. Okay. Because we got another special episode for you, of course. All right. So, topic for today's video: why Black folks, when it comes to culture and religion, they just not mixing. And I'm going to tell you how I'm going to make this case, of course, here in a little while. But before we move any further, we got to go over our two channel norms, of course. One, we attack points and not people. And then two, we don't do all the cussing, derogatory stuff. We are professional over here. All right. So let's get into our opening statement. Now, let me set the stage and the scene for you as it relates to today's topic. So, um, I'm intentionally using Black folks, and you'll see as we go through the pieces of evidence of why I chose to use Black folks. Because in another video, I used melanated people. In the future, I might use African American, right? Of course, we know we go by all these terms. Some of us relate to African American, some of us relate to Black, some of us go by morals, somebody go by Hebrew Israelites, right? We're all over the place, which in my eyes is part of our problem, right? Our identity is kind of everywhere. Well, it's kind of hard to come together under one umbrella, even though we know that, you know, melanated people, African American people, Black people are not a monolith, but yet and still, you know, it would be nice to actually unify under something, right? The African flag, um, we can't unify on under. The American flag, we can't unify under. So we have to find some unifying force, but that has yet to be seen. But let me not digress, right? So when I say that culture and religion doesn't mix well, and I'm saying that based on the fact that, well, look what you see that our culture produces, right? Look at the gangs, the violence, the drugs, the single homes, the lack of marriage, the um, lack of education, the lack of discipline when it comes to our health. I can keep going on and on, right? Uh, but our religious texts, as well as our religious underpinning, literally have answers for a lot of things that ail us in the Black community, the Black culture, right? But unfortunately, a lot of people are not following these texts. A lot of people are not heeding to the advice of these texts and of these spiritual and religious teachings. So that's why I'm making the case that culture and religion is not meshing very well. Now, what you will see once we start going through the evidence is that culture and religion is pretty much synonymous, right? Some might say they co-evolve together. Um, I I would probably fit under that mold. Definitely, as religion is a part of culture, right? No different than language and music. So religion plays a huge part in Black people lives, African American people lives, and really any culture lives. So, but what we want to really look at is why specifically isn't religion touching the hearts, really making a difference in the African American slash Black community. All right. So we're going to look at it once again historically. We're going to look at it culturally. All right. And why I'm making that case on that culture and religion, religion is not impacting culture the way it should be, while culture definitely is impacting religion. All right. So without further ado, let's get into our pieces of evidence, and it's gonna be a great show for you. All right. So let's get into our first piece of evidence. All right. So for our first piece of evidence, we're gonna get a little deep. All right. To be honest with you, we're gonna get a little deep on all of our pieces of evidence, but we're gonna start it out right. And we're gonna get into the history of Black religious history in America, right? So we're going to start from the Genesis and see how we get up to this point, to how religion evolved for Black people here in America, and really when we look at just in general, right? So I have an article from Pew Research Center, which of course is fantabulous. I'm trying to think of. I know I've pulled up stats before from Pure Research, but I don't know if I've ever read an article. So, um, it's a first. But so we're gonna read this, and probably won't get to read all of it, but quite a bit of it because there's some good information in it. So here we go. 2/3 of Black Americans are Protestant. Like about 4 in 10 Americans overall, the relationship between Black American Protestantism is unusual due to the history of slavery and segregation, which spawned the creation of several Black-led denominations that allow Black Americans to worship freely. Mostly founded prior to 1900, these historically Black Protestant denominations also supported colleges and helped Black communities in other ways. At the same time, Protestantism alone does not define the Black religious experience in the United States. Before enslaved people in America began converting to Protestantism in sizable numbers during the 1700s, they commonly followed traditional West African religions or Islam. Catholicism, too, has long had a presence among Black Americans, including in Maryland, Kentucky, Louisiana during the slavery era. And in the early 1900s, Islam began attracting thousands of Black Americans with the message that Christianity, like America writ large, had failed to offer them equality. So, just as briefly as this article get into, right? So we're talking about Protestantism, we're talking about Christianity, we're talking about Islam, right? And those are just a couple different religions, right? It appears that different religious ideologies attract African Americans because we're not a monolith, right? And when someone comes to you and say, "Hey, this religion hasn't been working out for y'all too well. Why don't you try this one?" Most people will be willing to listen because they know the truth, right? So I just wanted to say that before I continue to move on. What follows is a brief account of Black religious history in the United States with an emphasis on effort by religious groups to deal with racism and its effects, antebellum slavery, and religion. When they were first captured and taken to America, some enslaved Black people were Christian, more were Muslims, but the largest number by far would follow the traditional religions common in West Africa at the time. Many of these African belief systems included a supreme, distant God who created the world and pantheon of lower gods and ancestor spirits who are active in daily life. The religious heritage also included the use of herbal medicine and charms applied by specialists known as conjurers, who are believed to be able to heal disease, harm an enemy, or make someone fall in love. Historians say access to a conjurer gave enslaved people a sense of empowerment and control over their lives, while allowing for a worldview that distinguished them from slaveholders and connected them to Africa. So, of course, Many of us were taken from Africa during the slave trade. We know some Africans were already over here, right? I have to make it be known, because unfortunately, it's a lot of people think that every African came from uh, the slave trade, and that's just not true. And that every melanated person called themselves Africans. We know that the Moors were over here as well. So, and Hebrew Israelites. So let's continue. Interaction between enslaved people and Christian missionaries led to the spread of Christianity among Black Americans. Many slave owners initially resisted these evangelistic evangelistic efforts, partially out of concern that if slavery enslaved people became Christians, they would see themselves as their owners' equals. By 1706, this fear by slave owners had spurred legislation in at least 6 colonies declaring that an enslaved person's baptism did not entail their freedom. They had to let that be known, right? In addition, many enslaved people who did become Christians had to deal with restriction by masters who forbade them from attending church or prayer meetings. To get around these restrictions and for alternative to sermons by white clergy asking them to obey their owners, many Christian enslaved people held secret services with distinctive styles of praying, singing, and worship. These services were typically held in their cabin or in nearby woods, gullies, ravines, and thickets. So even when they got baptized as Christians, became Christians, right? They could not worship with other white people, right? Which kind of spurred the Black church, right? Because Black people can only worship with Black people. So from the onset, when we look at these religions, when it comes to Black and white people, there's racist roots, right? Discriminatory. What kind of religion allows that, right? But this was a culture that was established, right? So the culture impacted the religion, not the religion impacting the culture. Let's move on. Historians say the biblical story of the Israelites' escape from Egypt provided a good deal of inspiration to enslaved people. This was reflected in coded lyrics to some of their religious songs or spirituals. In Go Down Moses, for example, the lyrics plead with the Hebrew prophet to tell old Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Fergus's daughter wrote that when he was a child before he had escaped slavery. The first Black Protestant denomination, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, was founded in the early 1800s by Richard Allen, who had bought his freedom from slavery. Allen had become a Methodist preacher in the 1780s, but in 1787, he and others left the predominantly white church after being pulled from their knees in prayer for being in the section of the church where Black worship was not allowed. 3 decades later, he and representatives from 5 other congregations founded the AME denomination. A similar chain of events in New York led to the creation of the AME Zion Church in 1821. Towards the end of the Civil War and decades immediately after, Black Protestant denominations cemented their place more deeply in the U.S. religious landscape. Especially after emancipation, the AME and the AME Zion churches sent large numbers of missionaries to the South, leading many Black Christians to leave mostly white churches and join predominantly Black ones. The AME church grew from 20,000 members just before the start of the Civil War to 400,000 in 1884. While the AME Zion Church membership jumped from 4,600 at the start of the war to 300,000 in 1884, other major denominations that came into existence during this period were the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church and the National Baptist Convention. Overall, the U.S. Census Bureau counted nearly 2.7 million Negro communicants at Christian churches in 1890, reporting at least a 4-fold increase in Black and Christians over the previous 3 decades. It also found that Black people in 1890 were more likely than white people to be members of a Christian congregation. So Christianity spread huge, right? After the Civil War and heading into the 20th century, right? Christianity blew up, where it mentioned that a lot of Black people coming from Africa was Muslims, particularly in North Africa, right? When we talk about the Berbers and the Moors having their impact. Let's see. Scholars say predominantly Black churches of the 19th and 20th century played important roles in Black society outside the sphere of religion. In a period when discrimination barred Black people from access to various public amenities, many Black churches offered job training programs, insurance cooperatives, circulating libraries, and athletic clubs. So that is where you do see religion impacting culture, right? In the community. Back in a time where it was necessary, and this is part of the problem, right? Black people unified religiously. Black people unified under the banner of being black, right? Black power. When it was a time period when they had no other choice but to. Now, when we look at religion, the integration was huge. At this time, there was very much segregation and discrimination. Integration changed everything, particularly religiously. Let's see. Oh, new religious movements. The turn of the century in the early 1900s saw the founding of a small non-Christian black religious organization that urged black people to view themselves as Asiatic, Moorish, or as descendants of ancient Israelites that used religion to nurture identities outside of society racial hierarchies. In the words of religion, Professor Kambiz Ghani Basiri, they often contended that Christianity, the most widespread American religion, had failed black people. Many of these movements drew upon the narrative of Islam as an African religion. While they never attracted more than small portions of the black population, some of the organizations had a lasting influence in black communities. The Nation of Islam, which became the most prominent of these groups, was founded in 1930 in Detroit by a man known as Wallace D. Fard. It taught that black people were the original and superior race, that white people were devil, resulting from an experiment designed as a black scientist. Elijah Muhammad, who led the group from the mid-30s until his death in 1975, preached the need for financial and economic independence for black people in the black community. He taught that separation of the race was the logical response to racism for white people. And then we have other groups include the Moral Science Temple of America, the latter of which was founded in India but had a missionary in the U.S. who prophesied in black communities. Noble Drew Ali, the founding prophet of MSTA, taught his black men that we were not Negro but were Moorish Americans. And then he meant to link black America to the Muslims of Northwest Africa. So as you can see, we have Islamic roots, we have Moorish roots, we have Catholic roots. A lot of these roots stemming from Africa, but when it came to North America, United States of America to be exact, we had a lot of different ideologies touch us. And the one we felt the most comfortable with and the most in touch with was Christianity, right? Now, there could be a couple of different reasons for that, right? For the fact that they felt a connection with the Bible and the stories in the Bible that they felt like that it was literally parallel to the lives that they were living in North America. And I think that was probably be the most the reason that's at the very top, right? That may be all that I want to touch on. I just want to give you, a history of what was going on with black people here in America religiously and the history of it. But that to me that was important because I want you to see that, well, one, black people is not a monolith. I already stated that. But two, we had a lot of different ideologies to touch us. And the one that grabbed our hearts the most is Christianity, which most of us to this day is still mostly Christian, right? Most black people, African Americans, believe in a God, are attached to a religious system. So much so that we don't want to fool with nobody who don't believe in one. And that's a video for another day that we'll probably touch. All right. But in this, I think it showed how both religion and culture touches each other, but before integration, religion had more of an impact because it was more of a safe zone for blacks and African Americans, where we felt like a family, where we felt we can only really get the help from other people that look like us because racism and discrimination was real. That was a huge factor. All right. So let's get into our second piece of evidence and keep that train rolling. All right. So for my second piece of evidence, we're kind of going to touch on, well, we're going to get a little bit specific of how religion impacts the African community, African American community, Black community. Um, so I have an article from a platform called Study Corgi. Never heard of it before. And the title is "How Does Religion Affect the African Community?" Okay. As I stated before, we're going to be using these terms interchangeably: African, African American, Black. Okay. Because we all come from that continent. All right. Regardless of what race you are, right? Until there is a theory more powerful than the out of Africa theory, which some believe that it is. I just find the out of Africa theory a little bit more credible and compelling. This is what we're gonna go with. Okay. So let's get into this article. Um, when examining any particular culture, a variety of indicators can be used to describe people from that particular culture. In traditional African life, the sense of community is highly valuable. Within the African American culture, religion is the center of all things for this community. Religion affects each person in a unique way. The introduction of religion into the African community abroad has changed the lives of this community. That's a true statement. The existence of religion in the African American life is a unique experience to people from this community. It has never been experienced before that a group of people transported from their land, moved around the world to a place where they are not regarded as human, are treated as animals, given new languages, raped, persecuted, murdered, and freed, but still keep their faith. Faith was the only thing that kept Africans alive in the time of slavery, and therefore was a part of their daily lives. Because Africans in slavery felt unwanted, religion was the only thing that made them see themselves as beautiful. This beauty is currently shown in every part of their lives. For some people from this culture, dance and music provided creative means of praising God, while for others, the best way of respecting Jesus is respect for life. Even artists who earn a living speaking about wickedness and pleasure seeking still, in the end, find a way to praise God in a way. In the African American community, religion is a way of life and also is a part of personality that for many centuries of experience has been shaped. And that's a great point. The fact that the reason why, and I say that Black people are some of the most religious people, right? But unfortunately, a lot of time that religious doesn't isn't executed right in our day-to-day lives. Okay. But religion is such an emotional outlet, right? We sing, we dance, we praise, we pray, right? And that connection is kind of separate from reality where get money by any means, money over, you know what I mean, right? This kind of idea is separate from this idea. Okay. So that's why I say that religion and culture is not commingling very well for African Americans and Blacks. All right. Let's keep reading. The existing opinion of Americans has since time immemorial stated that the white churches make up the only significant spiritual movement in the country, and any other religion outside the white church is not important to the profile of the American religion. The burden of the conservative opinions about the Black religion and the Black church is associated with the gullible assumption that the religious experience of Black people is just a replication of the religious experience of the whites. No matter what the distinctive characteristics of the Black religion are, this religion is a component of the American experience and religion. 7 main Black denominations total to more than 80% of Black religious associations in America. This is a considerable part of the total religious population, especially at a time when many denominations of the whites are declining. About 15 to 20% of Black Christians belong to small Black Christian sects, like the mainline white Protestant churches and the Roman Catholic Church. The Black religious worldview of the African community in the Western world is associated with the African heritage as well as their conversion to Christianity at the time of slavery and afterward. Scholars of African American religion, culture, and history have in the last 20 years started to realize that Black people form their own unique and distinctive culture and religious cosmos, which is different from the white religious culture in which they were unwelcome guests. As domestic servants and slaves in the plantation of farm, Black people learned about some of the most personal aspects of the whites' culture and life, but only a few whites knew and cared to know about the Black people and their culture. And that's a great point that they make because, yes, Black people were forced to worship together and separate from whites. And so, yes, they did establish their own culture. They established their own singing, the dance, the praise, right? A lot of it came from Negro spirituals, right? So, literally, that's why we call it white church and black church. And really, you can call it white Christianity and black Christianity, right? Because one could say we worship in the same God, but are we really? Because would the same God allow white people to distance themselves from their so-called brothers and sisters? That's a difficult question to answer, right? Um, so yes, black people have to establish their own culture and their own identity separate from whites. So one can see why a lot of people will have questions about Christianity and any other religious beliefs. Some aspects of the black culture were viewed as our efforts to copy the mainstream white religious culture. Black people were seen as people with no culture, having nothing to claim as their own. They should have been given credit as a people because having come from other regions, they had a practical history, and therefore they must have had an effective culture. After many years of slavery came 100 years of segregation, both in North and South America. Currently, the Gulf is strengthened to a large extent by racism, the place of religion, residence, social life, and education. This is what I did want to get to for sure. Religion and culture are interrelated. Religion is articulated in terms of cultural forms such as content and style of preaching, songs, music, and forms of worship. Religion is the center of culture because it elevates the culture's core values to the highest level and legalizes them. Black sacred worldview elevates the black culture core values such as equality, freedom, African heritage, and justice elevate to the highest levels and legitimizes them. The black religion is the center of the black community. Black church developed new institutions like banks, low-income houses, and school, offering grounds for political activities, and also care for young talent for artistic, dramatic, and musical growth and development. A majority of the black culture is associated with the black religious tradition, including music, humor, literature, drama, and storytelling. With this is all true. What I'm saying in 2024, this is no longer true. The black church has sold out. I'm just going to keep it all the way G with you, right? The black church is not supposed to be involved politically with nothing in order to keep their tax exemption, in order to make sure they get all the things they need. So this is pre-integration, right? Once we got integrated, everything changed. So at one point in time, yes, religion had a huge impact on culture. And maybe people were acting a certain way. But with consumerism, capitalism, integration, political, I should say, non-participation, it changed. Let's keep reading. According to the U.S. Religious landscape research conducted in 2007, Black America considerably more religious on different aspects than the whole American population. Statistics indicate that 87% of Black people against 83% of the total American population are associated with a certain religion. That is a high number. It also indicated that 79% of Black Americans versus 56% of the total population have declared that religion is very important. Numerous scholars have estimated that about 30% of African slaves were Muslims, and the rest performed their local style of worship. All of them were eventually converted to Christianity. Even though some slaves became Catholics, the majority of them became Baptists. And I think that's all. And the rest of it goes to talk about the impact of music, dance, or tradition, art, and things of that nature. We know all that are different aspects of culture, and definitely religion had a huge impact on that, right? And of course, we know culturally, still to this day, not I think the secular has more impact nowadays than religion when it comes to those different forms, dance, music, and things of that nature. So, really, what happened with the black church and the black religious experience is they sold their soul, right? They sold it to secularism. They sold it to capitalism. Money became a huge factor. Wanted to keep up with the Joneses became a huge factor. Want to live like the whites became a huge factor. So now the religious experience didn't look the same anymore. There wasn't this unity and camaraderie that went on in the black church. Black men are not participating in church like they once used to. Black families are not together going to church like they once used to. We're talking about post 1960s, which changed everything for Black Americans. All right. Let's get into our third piece of evidence, but really we got 4 pieces of evidence. All right. It was such a great topic. We had to, get a bonus piece of evidence. All right. So I want to show you something. I want to show you a graph. All right. So let's get into our third piece of evidence. All right. So for my third piece of evidence, what I want to do is I want to show you a graph or a chart, really is what it is, of kind of like a contrast between culture and religion. And so I got it pulled up for you right now, and I just want to take a look at it and go over it. So they have different attributes all the way to the left, and then to the right they get culture and religion and how to kind of they compare and contrast. All right. So let's look at the top. It says beliefs. So culture varies greatly across different cultures. Religion, specific set of beliefs and doctrines. So religion is specific, culture varies. Practices, custom, rituals, and traditions, religious rituals and ceremonies. I would also say traditions. I'm surprised they could include that. So I would say culture and religion when it comes to practices is similar, even though they'll look a little bit differently, right? Values may differ based on cultural norms for culture. Religion derived from religious teachings, all right, which you will think that they would be pretty in sync, right? Aligned. One would think, all right, or should be. Language, unique languages associated with different cultures, and then religious texts may be written in specific languages, which we know that most religious texts are translated, all right. So that's a huge difference. Art and architecture varies in style from across different cultures. Religious architecture often reflect religious themes, even though it can also often reflect culture. Right? Social structure varies based on cultural norms and tradition, may influence social structure and hierarchy. All right. We understand that there is a hierarchy when it comes to religion, no different than there's a hierarchy when it comes to culture. All right. Geographical influence. Culture can be influenced by geography. Religion may have specific geographical origins or influences. Correct. So, of course, we had Islam that has its genesis in a certain area, as well as Christianity, but then those spread to different parts of the globe. Symbolism. Symbolic representations vary across cultures. Religious symbols hold specific meanings, but which is also be culture as well. And then last but not least, impact on daily life, which is kind of what this episode is about. Culture shapes daily life practices and tradition. Religion often guides daily life practices and moral decisions, which it's supposed to. All right. My case that I'm making is that it doesn't. And more so that culture shapes it, right? What's going on in the real world, what's going on in social media has been shaping it. So when people look at their morals and their religious beliefs and practices, those are more specific to a certain day or days. But it's not 365 for most people. Most people are not living a religious life like that. They just be honest. And religion is not impacting us culturally in general. All right. So I just wanted to show you that, so you can kind of see a side by side comparison of how culture and religion either impacts each other or have differences. Which I would say that a lot of it is similar, but the differences are huge, right? Of where they kind of part ways. All right. So we're gonna go to my bonus piece of evidence, our last piece of evidence, evidence number 4, and we're gonna wrap it up very beautifully for you. All right, let's get it.
Fragments from the periphery of the African spiritual and cultural system became Christianity. And when the Protestant broke away in the 1500s, the Ethiopian church was already 1,000 plus years old. Had nothing to do with Protestant Europeanism. When the Catholic Church was founded in the 10th century, the Ethiopian church was already 500 years old. Has nothing to do with that. Though some people try to make it appear that we borrowed it from them in that form. No. If you look at how we look at the arrangements and our referencing the divine and our relationship to divinity and the elemental understanding of how to build human character so that it imitates divinity, you get a good sense of what African culture is really about. A lot of us practice the Yoruba culture, some of us the Igbo culture and others, but none of them have any think over the other. Each of them are groups of African under certain circumstances at a certain time in history trying to work this thing out. You know, the Yoruba have done an extraordinary job. The Igbo did an extraordinary job before they were attacked, defeated by the British. If you look at the Igbo, for instance, who didn't have the kind of the royal kingship that the Yoruba had, the Igbos their power resided in the sacred groves. When the whites figured that out, they just burnt the whole damn forest down in order to destroy the sacred groves of the Igbo people. And so that dismantled and disorganized the people because they had violated the sanctity of what these people believed and thought they knew. With the Yoruba, they tried to capture the king and capture the palace and stuff like that. But these people were not doing it for any religious reason. They were doing it for basic human greed, envy, and jealousy. When they came into Africa, if you read some of the documents they sent back to Europe, telling them what they had found, cities that was laid out in grids. They drew pictures of some of these cities. If I showed you slides, it'd blow your mind. They talked about the walls that people had built, the beautiful palaces. And then 2 centuries later, they're betraying us, the barbarians hanging from trees. And it gets crazy. And because we don't know our history, we get to thinking that's the way the deal was. What the African says is that all things are expressions of aspects of the divine essence having your peculiar experience. So when we talk about voodoo, there was no religion called voodoo when we left Africa. That's a new thing. Let's get that straight. And so when we think of this voodoo, you got to be careful to learn how to rephrase and recast the system of worship that we engage in. And say, let's just take Haiti. Involves elements, loas. Those elements is a reference to the forces of nature and cosmology as interpreted and understood by our ancestors through experiences. So when we see the drawings that they call veves, that is some ancestor, some of our great minds' interpretation of a cosmic energy formation that responds to a certain vibration, be it language, music, or some other rhythm form. And so we paint what we perceive to be the representative instrument of that elemental energy vibration. You understand? we have something we call orishas. And they actually, people think that orishas are persons. But orishas are not persons. We use anthropomorphism to symbolize concepts, ideas, and principles. Orishas are concepts, ideas, and principles that represents forces and powers in both nature, in the human, and in the cosmology. To the degree to our ancestors understand how to define them and isolate them and to understand their function and how to have a relationship to them, that is the degree to which we create a theology around and about them. That's African sacred science. But most people would not even deal with our sacred science as sacred science. And we don't study enough to defend the integrity of our institutions. There's nothing that even borders on our ancestors' sacred science and an understanding of how this world works. No institution, none of them. They're all primitive compared to the depth at which we understood.
So there you have it, man. That was my last piece of evidence. And I want to wrap it up with that video for a couple of different reasons. Earlier I mentioned that there's a reason why I use blacks, right, for this video. And the reason for that is because once we started calling each other ourselves black instead of Africans, well, our mentality changed, right? You can't talk about religion, culture, community, or anything without bringing up Africa. All right. Unfortunately, a lot of us have either lost our way, lost our history, don't want to know our history. We have been indoctrinated with someone else's religion, and we can be whatever religious practice, any religious belief we want to. I do believe in the First Amendment, freedom of religion, right? But with that freedom, I think comes some responsibility. It comes a responsibility to know the history behind whatever it is that you choose to believe in. And if you are someone that's melanated, how can you deny your heritage and your history that you say you're so-called proud of? Okay. I believe that is the reason why when we look at our culture and our religion is disconnected, because we disconnected from our own history, from our own true culture. I gave you a brief history and background of religion, but I also gave you a brief history of African people. Yes, unfortunately, we have a lot of trauma and a lot of negativity that we experience because a lot of us did come here during the African slave trade. But you have to realize that's a small percent in the United States of America. Most of it actually went to South America. So when we talking about religion and why it doesn't impact us today like it once used to, is because we lost our identity. We lost our way. We lost who we truly was. The dances and the language that we once had is now gone. It's eradicated. We assimilated. We're Europeanized. That is the main impetus of why religion no longer impacts us like it once used to. We have to understand who we are. We've lost it. Okay. We've become so immersed in someone else's religion, someone else's culture. Capitalism is not ours. Consumerism is not us. We are a spiritual based people. We are a loving people. We are a communal people. We are a tribal people. And that is not what you see in Black culture, because Black culture is not ours. Black culture is a representation of the trauma and the hurt and the emotionalism that we've been through since we arrived in this country. if we get back to the true essence and the core of who we are, as some will say, the chosen people, then maybe we'll get back to religion impacting culture and culture impacting religion. All right. Hey, I think that's a great way to end. Hey, it's been an amazing 50th episode, man. I appreciate you rocking with me as always, man. Thank you. And I hope to have 50 more, 150 more to infinity and beyond. All right. Hey, you already know my links will be in the description. You can pick up my latest book, The Relationship Guide to Business Signs of Reason. You know, you got my merch that you can go pick up. My consultant, if you would like to do either individual or couple session, definitely hit me up or rcdconsultancy.com. As always, I'm you, you are me, love always, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. Hey, that puts a wrap on episode number 50. Deuces. One love.